You sold your first company to Google, you sold your second one to Okta, and you're building a third one. Doing this one time is hard. What brings you back again and again to the founding journey?
I guess I crave the 0 to 1. That's where I get the energy.
And what's the secret sauce?
There is no secret sauce. The only secret sauce is it's not repeatable. It's luck every time. Things are tough.
Yeah.
Your team doesn't care. Your investors don't care. Your mother doesn't care. It's on you. Figure it out.
How do you approach that in thinking about who you should partner with, who somebody should partner with, and co-found a business with?
Yeah, it's hard and so important. And one is you want complementary skills, of course, right?
You built your first 2 companies in the US and in the Silicon Valley. You were successful. And then you made the decision to build the third one from India. Why did you make the decision?
Yeah.
Jay, thank you for joining us today on the Catapult Code. We're very excited to have you.
Great to be here.
It's the one-line description that the team came up with is that you are a 3x Silicon Valley founder. I'll kind of modify that, maybe 2x Silicon Valley, 1x Indus Valley founder. So really good to have perspectives, 3x the number of perspectives a regular founder would have. So excited to have.
Twice as much, 1/3 as valuable. But yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So I'm very curious about learning about your path to becoming a founder. So you started at IIT in Madras. You then went to the US for your PhD. You then went to McKinsey. And then you walked away from what looks like, up until that point, a fairly institutional story or a corporate story, executive story, what have you. So what happened along the way for that journey to then turn into the founder story you have today?
Yeah. I did my undergrad at IIT, and then what good IIT kids did back then was they went to the US and they did a PhD. And so I went and did a PhD. And I think during my PhD, I realized I didn't want to stay in academia. I didn't want to be a professor. I didn't want to be in research. And so at some point, I was like, okay, I should go into business if I'm not going to be in academia or research. And the only business I knew at that point was McKinsey. It was famous. And so applied to some consulting firms and I joined McKinsey. And I think until then, and McKinsey does an extremely good job with this, they find essentially smart people that work hard and they just keep setting the next bar. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like your undergrad. That's kind of like your PhD. You're like trying to hit the next goal. And McKinsey nails it. So I was basically in the McKinsey get promoted role, rat race for 5 years. And I remember this, there was like some summer intern event in Florida and, McKinsey takes you to these great, like resorts. And I'm sitting on the beach with someone who was in my class who had left McKinsey, and we were having a Corona on the beach. And he's like, it's really good outside of McKinsey. You should think about it. And it was literally, it was kind of like I started thinking about it and I realized, one, I was just stuck in this sort of treadmill, just get to the next promotion. But two, I think fundamentally it was this notion of I wanted to be the guy, not the guy advising the guy. Mm. And that was the sort of unlock that came to me where I realized, look, I'd rather be my own boss or do my own thing rather than always offering advice and not being there to see the implementation and own the outcome. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's Corona on the beach / this thought process was like, you know what, I have to leave consulting and do something else. And again, not knowing much about startups, I was like, okay, where do you go I was in New York at that point, and not knowing much about startups, I just started applying to jobs in San Francisco. And in San Francisco, I got a job at Zynga, the gaming company. This was before their IPO. Farmville had just launched. Cityville was taking off. And I became a product manager that was optimizing the price of virtual cows. And that was sort of my first foray into startups. And a year into that, I was like, okay, now I kind of have a better sense of startups. And then that's where my actual startup journey started.
Mm-hmm. The beach should charge a tax, or there should be a tax on that corona because you sold your first company to Google, you sold your second one to Okta, and you're building a third one. Doing this one time is hard. So what brings you back again and again to the founding journey? And what's the secret sauce?
There is no secret sauce, because let's talk about the third one. I don't know what the secret sauce is. The only secret sauce is it's not repeatable. It's luck every time. I think actually thinking about McKinsey for a second, one of the things I realized about McKinsey in hindsight was they also keep you occupied by changing the projects continuously. And so you kind of get the stimulation of learning a new industry or learning a new business. And I think that is part of my, I guess, DNA, where I really like that 0 to 1, learning something from scratch, then trying to get good at it. And so part of why, after selling my first startup, I left Google. I mean, I left well before their retention and like payments and stuff ended. I did the same thing. Google, I lasted 2 years. Okta, I lasted only 1 year. And I think part of it is I guess I crave the 0 to 1. That's where I get the energy. There's some combination of that. Plus, when you start building presentations, when you start having meetings to review stuff for another meeting, that's when, like the company's gotten too big. But that was me.
Follow-on question to that, like, the wisdom that was taught to me early in my business career was, it takes a lifetime to build expertise in a domain. But when I look at your journey, Zynga, Appurify, atSpoke, and Stitchflow, there's no, the domain seem to be different each time. So how do you pick the next problem to solve each time? Like, is there an algorithm? Is there a pattern to how you pick the problem each time?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is no, the algorithm doesn't work. But I think when I left McKinsey and was at Zynga was great, but then I was in Silicon Valley in like 2011. Everyone has the startup bug. And so I'm in San Francisco and I'm meeting all these really smart engineers at Zynga, just incredibly smart folks at Zynga. And I actually was completely agnostic to what we were going to do. I was just meeting people. And then a friend of mine introduced me to my co-founder, one of my co-founders for Appurify, my first company, and they were absolute experts in mobile testing, which was what mobile testing infrastructure, which was what Appurify was about. And so I basically got to live somebody else's lifelong experience in mobile testing, infrastructure, device management, et cetera. And then I got to apply, quote unquote, the business skills on top of that. So that was Appurify. I was completely agnostic. And then at Google, Appurify continued at Google. And then I left again with one of my co-founders for my first company and another co-founder to start atSpoke, my second company. And there I tried to take a much more algorithmic approach. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to look for so personally, my bias was I've always leaned towards B2B versus B2C. One, I don't think I have consumer instincts. Two, I actually think B2B is a little bit more predictable. Startups are risky. B2B is potentially a little less risky. And so I think I always started with B2B. And in B2B, one of my approaches was literally going, again, this is 2016 when we started Spoke, my second company. We literally went to SAP's website, IBM's website, HP's website, Microsoft's website, go to the product list, look at all of the categories. Each of those is like $1 billion market. And so we're literally go find some old software that is extremely valuable and try to build a modern version of that was the algorithm that we used. And we actually iterated towards fixating on ServiceNow and the IT service management space. And that's actually how we came upon the atSpoke idea. What I learned at atSpoke was you can't just pick an idea at random and then go try to build a company there. And so the first 2 to 3 years of atSpoke was just the most brutal version of learning the industry. And so Stitchflow, my third company, I was like, I'm not going to go through that 3 years of IT learning again. And so I'm going to go do IT. And so Stitchflow started off with IT. As we'll talk about, we're no longer doing IT, but that was at least the logic. So first, hubris, I could do anything where I piggybacked on somebody else's. Second, I'll pick a space and go into it. Nope, it takes a long time. Third time, I don't want to repeat that. And anyway, that's sort of how I went about it.
Was the brutal aspect the 3 years that you're going up this learning curve, was it because you're trying to accelerate a 10-year learning curve into 3 years, or was it your process of learning that if you were to do it again, you'd have a different approach?
It's a great question. I think some of it, look, 3 times in, the third time in, I'm not going to make the same mistakes I made the first year, right? I'm going to make new mistakes, but I think you skip a lot of mistakes as you get faster. So some of it is just more efficient, but some of it is until you're actually, again, I primarily operate in the software space. Until you're actually building software for an actual end user that uses it every day, that knows the entire history of the space and what works and what doesn't. Some of it just has to be knowledge that comes from experience. Like it's just you need the reps, right? The sort of most common trope is, oh my God, ServiceNow or Salesforce, it's so hard to use. Let's just go build a better version of that. And actually, no, there's a lot of stuff to go do. And I think that's the brutal part, right? So it's just, you have to go through it, and you're going to be wrong, and you're going to be iterating over and over again.
So, given the 3 journeys, one could call you a 0 to 1 specialist. What does it take to get to 1, especially in the context of B2B software? What does it feel like to get to a point where you feel this has wings?
Yeah, I mean, I think so what does it take? I mean, I actually think for a 0 to 1, Elizabeth Yin, a VC, had a tweet a while ago, which I think was a perfect definition of PMF, where you got to do 3 things. You got to be super valuable. You have to be genuinely valuable to a user. The unit economics at some scale need to make sense. You can't give away $1 for 90 cents. And 3, you need to be able to repeatably find the next cohort of customers. Like you need to be able to 10x or 15x from there. Like you need the combination of those 3. And the 0 to 1 to me is solving for those 3, which frankly, you have to start with a strong hypothesis. You need to be, I can talk about all the different aspects of it, but fundamentally you don't quit till you get to those 3. And the 0 to 1 is all about not quitting, is my personal take.
And what does it take from your actions perspective? What are there any frameworks that you've made along the way? Like what does it take for the founder or the company or the team to get to that PMF, especially in B2B software?
I don't know about frameworks, but it's again, all of the truisms are true. Like all of the YC advice and stuff like that is true. Be super close to the customer. Initially just focus on customer value. Once you find that customer value, you then try to sort of standardize from there. Be super attuned to is this customer actually going to? So, for example, one thing, especially early on, that I'm a big fan of is Dharmesh Shah at HubSpot said the early days of HubSpot, they intentionally charged monthly, not annually. They didn't want to lock you in for a year because if the product's not good and you've locked them in for a year, you're not learning anything. You want the customer to be able to leave every month. So it's essentially that. Initially, just assume you're going to fail. Assume the customer is going to leave you. And what are the sort of just brutally sort of keep working towards that. So that's, I would say, is the basic framework, especially recently, but even over the last 10 years, you got to be able to iterate on product much quicker. You have to figure out ways to not create monoliths that take forever to pivot, that take forever to change. Those are sort of the primary 2 things initially. Once you get to the basic, okay, there's a product that's adding value to 5 or 10 people, 5 or 10 customers. There's then, okay, is this actually and assume the economics make sense. Then the next question is, how do you go from 5 to 10 to 50? And that's where I think a lot of founders, especially technical founders, don't spend enough time thinking about this. Demand gen and marketing is a completely different game. So I'd say frameworks, the initial 0 to 1 for me is build, don't, and all based on mistakes, by the way, because we did this in each company. Don't go build for a year and a half and launch a year and a half later, right? You got to You got to launch much quicker. You got to keep iterating. Don't lock people into annual contracts. Be monthly. Constantly iterate to see if they're actually retaining, if they're actually adding value. Okay, now I've used my investor networks. I've used my personal networks. I have to actually think about what repeatable demand generation looks like. And so then there's a sort of set of frameworks around that. Then you got to start thinking about go to market. If those two work out, then I think then the next set of problems show up. But at least that to me is the 0 to 1.
You're talking a lot about just this concept of a really tight feedback loop and how do you learn as quickly as possible executing on that. Can you give some insights or examples of just across the different companies that you've worked on, how you've learned to accelerate that feedback loop or how you've learned to distill what's coming back from the market to bring it back into what you're going to execute next, how you build your organization? Actually,
and I don't know if some of it is, so my immediate answer to that question is not a framework or anything. It is essentially, and maybe some of this comes with doing it a few times and making all of the mistakes, but I would say my biggest learning on the feedback loops is even when everyone else tells you you're thrashing and the company's like, the CEO keeps saying different things, don't do it, ignore them. If you feel something off in your gut, like, and maybe some of that is experience, but just if something feels off, detect that sooner is probably the primary thing I have learned. I feel uncomfortable much quicker than I used to feel uncomfortable. I know that's not a particularly satisfying answer, but
could you give me an example of when that might have happened?
Stitchflow, my current company, we are completely pivoting from IT to marketing, and even the process. And I would actually say, so most recently, my third company, the rate at which we realized something wasn't working and kept changing and trying different things, trying different products, trying different markets, et cetera. And now even switching off of the core IT space and moving into something else is just where I could have taken 6 months to make a decision that I'm now able to make in 2 months. And that is just because you don't see the results coming. Like a very tangible example, I'm much more impatient about outbound email experiments now than I was in the past. Previously, they'd say, no, you got to send 5 emails. You got to give it 2 weeks. You got to do a full batch of, no, like, in day one, based on that first day's response rate or the second day's response rate, you start seeing, you start getting a sense for it. So at the 0 to 1 phase, I don't know, like there's obviously some sort of balance to be maintained, but be skeptical, be just completely cynical and skeptical often is sort of where I get to, because that just gives you more reps, right? Like I guarantee you the idea that you pitched to your VCs or that you pitched to your wife and then started your bootstrap company is not actually what hits PMF. It is and so the only thing you have is oxygen to keep going until you run out of cash, which means you got to go through iterations. That's it. And so like, I think that's the feedback loop. And so just really be cynical about everything. Assume, try to read signals earlier. The downside of this, it feels thrashy to a lot of people. And the question is it thrashy and are you actually being thrashy to your detriment, or are you being thrashy? Other people feel uncomfortable, but it's still the right thing to do for the company is, I think is the question to balance.
And so that involves many hard decisions. So in each of these journeys, what are some of the toughest decisions you've had to make?
It's always people. That's always the toughest, right? At the end of the day, and there are different types of folks, right? Like starting with co-founders, I've had to have difficult conversations with co-founders in every single one of my startups and part ways. And I would like to think that I had an executive coach who said, like, the only focus you need to have is what is the right thing to do in service of Stitchflow or in service of atSpoke or in service of AppPurify. That's the only question to ask. What is the right thing to do in service of this company? And so I would like to think that if I'm not the right CEO in service of Stitchflow or in service of AppPurify, I would have the humility to be like, hey, I'm not the right person for this. But the same exact thing applies to co-founders. The same exact thing applies to employees. So the toughest thing always is people related. And yeah, I mean, it's just, even there you get faster over time, but basically that's always the toughest stuff. With Stitchflow, my current company, we're literally end of lifing all of our revenue while we are completely pivoting to a brand new thing. That's scary. A lot of people were like,
Yep.
what are we doing? But I don't know. It's at some level. So it's only tough decisions. Like, I don't know.
There are two really interesting concepts. I mean, certainly want to talk about this pivot and the how much your instinct is playing a role in where you're going next, the thrashingness aspect. But you also said something really important. And I think this is the art more than science of choosing your co-founder or figuring out how to structure things with co-founders. And with your experience and giving people advice on this, your perspective, how do you approach that and thinking about who you should partner with, who somebody should partner with, and co-found a business with?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard and so important. And I think start with the obvious stuff, like don't partner with bad people no matter how good they are. So like get past the ethics, get past just that a-hole, don't work with them, that kind of stuff. But beyond that, I mean, two schools of thought. One is you want complementary skills, of course, right? You need to have complementary skills, whether, and like they're all the standard things. Like at Purify, we had a CTO, a VP of engineering, and a CEO. Spoke, we had a chief design officer, head of design, head of engineering, CEO, because our angle there was well-designed software. At Stitchflow, it was ops and product and marketing. Ops, product, CEO, and engineering. And so I think there's obviously you want to be complementary. Like the absolute failure case that you see often is two people that both think they're the CEO and they both only do the same thing and don't want to do the other thing. That's bad. So you want complementary skills. And I think that's a given. Beyond that, though, I mean, again, it's very, in some level, obvious advice, but you are going to fight. You're going to have super tough conversations. And does every fight or argument or tough decision feel like the end of the relationship? Or who are the people that you get to, you can get to a stage with where you can have that incredibly hard, passionate, tough conversation. And at the end of it, you folks know, okay, we've made the decision. We're going to do the next thing. And all of this, that was business, not personal. I think that's the characteristic you're looking for. There's advice that says work with people you've worked with forever, for a long time. Personally, I think that there's value in that because you know whether you can handle those tough times with them. But a lot of my co-founders, I over my 3 companies, I knew to some degree some people I didn't know at all, and that's fine. They ended up being some of my best friends to this date and like best partners. So that's sort of how I approach it, complementarity and
complementary, working towards better answers. Kind of getting out of the way there.
It's actually more emotional than that. It's yes, everyone is obviously trying to work towards better answers. And I think that I almost have as the filter of, are our objectives aligned? Like in service of Stitchflow, are we objectively on the same page about what we want to do? We want to do this for the company. Or I'm not. So what I mean is like the obvious filter is somebody who's in it for themselves, somebody who's trying to maximize their outcome. Things like that doesn't make sense. You have to get past that. But after that, I would actually say it's complementary in terms of lanes of expertise and frankly, lanes of expertise, but also just what you're going to own. Because especially with AI and stuff, I don't necessarily know. I mean, you don't want to hire a VP of engineering who's never done any engineering before, but honestly, there's a lot more flexibility on what complementary is. Complementary in terms of what they're going to own in the company. You don't want everyone to just want to do sales. Like actually initially you got to build some product and you got to do some marketing and you got to do some sales, etc. So complementary that way. But beyond that, can I argue passionately with this person and get to an agreement and not hold a grudge? That's, I don't know how to define it, but that's what you're solving for.
Yeah.
That's like the single most important thing. That's all 0 to 1 is. It's like fight, arguments, tough conversations, and you find an outcome.
Yeah.
I want to double down on the people decisions part that you mentioned and, parting ways with a senior employee stuff. And there's hard decisions and harder decisions. And I'm a cap table guy. So there's decisions that involve a co-founder, for example, the co-founder parting ways that you talked about are pivoting the entire company that requires people on the cap table to buy in. Can you talk about that element a bit?
Yeah. Again, I think the sort of principled way to think about this is the only thing that matters is what is best in service of company, right? In service of Stitchflow, in service of AppPurify, in service of atSpoke. And at that point, yes, like cap table dynamics come into it. But if you think about, for example, co-founders and stuff, there are absolutely cap table implications. And I can tell you, hey, if you part ways and you're not best friends with a co-founder at acquisition, you better ask for this when they sign their release, because otherwise it's going to be a pain at the acquisition. I have those stories. So that's the don't make the same mistake multiple times bit. But the flip side of that is I think in service of the company, it doesn't matter what their position is at the cap table, including the CEO. That's sort of starting point number one. Is sort of how I've approached it.
One of the tougher decisions, which is also a cap table and stakeholder decision, is to make the decision to sell a company, and that's a complex one. And there may be different reasons why you sold different businesses. But can you talk through the exit decision and how did you decide that this was the right time to sell each company?
Yeah. So I at least my personal approach has had two different, one sort of like, I guess, contrarian, or at least the way I've thought about it. Again, standard advice is don't talk to corp dev, don't talk to other companies, don't think about acquisition. It takes too much time, etc. I'm personally like, I will always have a conversation. Like it's at some level, it's kind of like, hey, if you're working once a year, go get go take an interview, right? Like you need to know the value of your company. You need to know what your options are. You need to build these relationships over time. So I have this whole sort of thing about there's no such thing as just reaching out to a company and getting acquired the next day, unless it's a small deal. That doesn't happen. You can't incept a deal on the spot and make it happen. It takes time. And so one thing in general, I've always been open to having relationships with different players in the space, et cetera. Beyond that, I think fundamentally there's one of my investors at Greylock from my second company, atSpoke, always his framework for this was always local maximas and global maximas. Fundamentally, when an acquisition offer comes in, so personally, I'm always willing to have a conversation. I want to know, we're a business, we're always for sale. So like basically I'm always willing to have a conversation. And one of the aspects of that conversation is, if something actually were to materialize, do you think it's a local maxima or a global maxima? AppPurify, my first company, mobile testing infrastructure, our exit to Google was a little over $100 million. And I would actually argue that was a global maxima for the mobile testing infrastructure space. It was Android was exploding. iOS versions were exploding. Google needed to be a player. We basically became part of Google Firebase AppPurify became Google Firebase Test Cloud, and then it became the tech behind a lot of the internal mobile QA at Google. And so that was that acquisition proved to be the right time to exit, because I don't think the market was going to be that much bigger. And so it was a obvious global maxima, and it made sense. That was the logic there. With atSpoke, my second company, it was a local maxima, because ITSM is a huge space. And if we had we sold, so we were basically Slack and ML based ticketing, IT ticketing. And we sold the company in 21. LLMs took off in 23. So, and there's all these dynamics about selling to IT where you have to absolutely develop relationships over time and establish a presence. And so year 5 for us was compounding, had much better sort of compounding sales than year 2 versus year 4, et cetera. And so that in hindsight, that was an absolute local maxima. If we had kept going for 2 more years, we would have been one of the dominant players in AI first ticketing. And so I think one aspect is global maxima versus local maxima. I think the second part of it is, again, especially in the 0 to 1 stage, your co-founders matter a lot. So I had sold my first company, atSpoke. I don't necessarily think I didn't need to sell. I wasn't ready necessarily. I think I still wanted to keep going, but my co-founders mattered as well, and their opinions mattered as well. And it was at some level, the reality is it is a collective decision. Like you need everybody on the cap table, like to be bought in, right? So I think those are sort of is it a global maxima or a local maxima? Do you think you can make this much bigger? And do you have conviction on that? And what is everybody else saying around the table are sort of the two things that I've always used.
Super. That element of I know you to be a decisive guy, both in terms of speed and conviction. So the element of getting voices around the table is an interesting perspective to have in terms of And do you have a rubric or a code in terms of how listen to everything, strongly held, use loosely? How do you think about in every hard decision there's an alternate path in the multiverse? So.
Yeah, I think I'm almost certainly strong decisions loosely held. In fact, that has been the exact feedback I've received multiple times. I think I tend to form opinions and decisions super quickly, but I am absolutely willing to be argued off of it. And in fact, I welcome it. And so that's sort of in general been the framework I've been using.
Okay, well, I do want to talk about in building a company, how you build teams, how you build culture. It's a really hard part of all of this, and what you're looking for outside of just they have the competency of X and you're trying to hire for X. But what's that pattern recognition of what you're really trying to find in people that join?
I think personally, I have a sort of bias to, so obviously competency in whatever field they're being hired into, whether it's engineering, product, etc. But I think there's and I'm sure some of it is just a reflection of how I am, but there is some version of give a damnness and just a willingness to, again, tying this to 0 to 1, a willingness to sort of debate, a willingness to sort of be intellectually rigorous about why they're doing what they're doing is probably the biggest thing I look for. And I'm, for example, when you think about for example, my SDR team or someone in marketing, in the 0 to 1 phase, you want that marketer about, hey, I'm responsible for creating a list of accounts and prospecting. You want that marketer who is doing that to not just repeatedly do it, even if there are no results. You want them to say, at the 0 to 1, you want them to be like, I don't think this is working. Hey, Jay, what's wrong? Is our hypothesis wrong? Is this the wrong type of customer, et cetera? And so that is, and so the best folks on my team are those folks, right? Not the person who just kept on dialing. It's this is what happened today, or the person that kept on sending emails, but just started questioning stuff. Same exact thing as it relates to CS. All of that is sort of primarily what I'm looking for. Again, let's be very clear. I'm 0 to 1 and then exited has been my story. So I have no idea what to say for how to go from 1 to 100. But in that 0 to 1 or 0 to whatever 5, that is a key skill to look for. Just that it's back to this. The only thing that'll save you is iteration. So you're looking for people that are willing to iterate. So that's a key characteristic for me. The standard no assholes rule, it's not worth it. 3 times in, it is just not worth people that don't fit in. Not fit in culturally, not fit in socially, but I'm talking about just people that aren't collaborative, people that aren't willing to work with their team. I think that matters a lot. I went through a whole radical candor phase where we screen for radical candor. You're looking for, and I still believe in that strongly, where you are looking for people that are absolutely, I think one of the things I screen for personally is defensiveness. If you are super defensive and to any criticism, and that is a thing that I interview for, that's usually a really bad sign, because you are going to be wrong 98% of the time in the 0 to 1 journey. And if and you are just either can process it emotionally to be criticized or to be questioned, or you're not willing to change your assumptions based on the data that's coming in. That's something that I look for a lot as well. Again, all this over time, and sort of, I'd say when I think about AppPurify, then atSpoke, then Stitchflow, the reality is, I think my model of hiring and team is a little bit different from, I'd say, the textbook version, in that I don't have any illusions that based on 10, 15 hours of spending time with someone, you are going to like nail it every time. You are going to make mistakes. They are going to find that your company is not the right fit for them. We are going to find that they're not the right fit. It's just mathematically impossible to figure out everything about a person in the time that you spend. And so I think some of the reality is you are going to make mistakes, and don't beat yourself up about it. Learn and then get better each time is sort of my general approach as it goes to recruiting.
One thing that really stuck out in what you said around finding the right people and making sure that you're finding people who want to learn from what they're doing, right? So not just repeat again and again. That introduces basically an element of risk taking. And from my own experience, one of my hard lessons, I guess we're comparing notes here in some respects, where I'm asking to compare notes. I really had to learn to, when you're in this high pressure environment as a founder and you're trying to do the 0 to 1 and figure things out as quickly as possible, there can be a lack of patience that I would have in the process as somebody's coming up their own learning curve for something. And as you are orchestrating the whole vision and all the different facets, and somebody's responsible for one function, to then go and make a mistake that you're like, I wouldn't make that mistake, and then pause and have that teachable moment.
Yeah.
And then put on pause all the other things and context that you have that you're dealing with outside of that teachable moment. I find that that's one of the most difficult parts of not only finding the curious people, but preserving and cultivating that ability and risk taking. And I still have to catch myself in that process, because you're just trying to do that. I'm trying to execute so quickly. But I don't know if that's come up for you, or if, pro tips you might have along the way.
No, completely resonates. And the fact that you try to catch yourself makes you a much better man than me is like sort of where I would start on that. So my pro tip on that, have co-founders who have that patience. Like it's and look, at some level, different people operate in different ways, and respect. I mean, there's obviously going back to the no assholes rule, like respect, everyone's in it, to be collaborative in service of company. Beyond all of that, Shankar, my co-founder at Stitchflow, is in some ways the diametric opposite of me, where he is so methodical, he is so process oriented, he is so patient working with his team and his colleagues, and is focused on training. He's not patient about, hey, like he expects the best, but he knows. And especially in the context of India versus the US, I think we found that there's more time you need to spend on that with a lot of the Indian talent that we've been working with. So I think my pro tip is find people on your team that are really, really good at that. Is my primary pro tip. I think my general model is trust but verify initially, and like the gap between trust and verify, the gap between verification just grows over time. And is it the best model? I don't know. Is it? But that is at least what I've gotten comfortable with.
Yeah.
I think developing people is insanely important, and if you're not good at it, like me, you better have someone on your team that is and that cares about it. Pratyush at atSpoke, my co-founder at atSpoke, was phenomenal at it. He was also my co-founder at AppPurify. He was phenomenal at it. Or you find people on your team that really give a damn about it. Ted, my head of engineering at Stitchflow, he's not just about excellent engineering. He's like, okay, I'm going to establish practices, and I'm going to spend time doing that with everybody else on my team. I make those folks heroes. Like that is easily the most important thing. And so I guess that's how I solve for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it also ties to, I think everyone understands or has seen kind of the old adage of you want to 100x the thing that you're very good at and not spend a lot of time on what you're mediocre at, just because you'll never be world class in one respect. And you're never going to catch up to the people who do that naturally. And so this comes to who you co-found with, how you build teams, covering those blind spots. So it makes total sense.
Yeah. And it sounds easy, but it's not that easy, because there are areas where you think there are those overlapping areas. There are where the Venn diagram, like this is, my co-founder is really good at this, but especially when it comes to people decisions and org structure, for example, and have you had those thing where that this is an area of strength, Pratyush is really good at this, but then it's conflicting, there's a decision to make. So did you have first amongst equals? How does a decision framework work?
Yeah, I think again this gets better over time, but I think my non-negotiables are there is one CEO. And the rule of that is very simple, which is at the end of the day, it's their job to be the tiebreak. That is the sort of, so it is first among equals in that sense, where you cannot have, personally, I find it really hard to understand the co-CEO type model, et cetera, right? That's one thing. There is a spot. And so like very specific. So fundamentally, when you part ways with the co-founder, my second startup, there was a fundamental strategy shift that we needed to make. And it was based on data. And it was, if we all couldn't get to the same spot, we all could not get to the same spot on the strategy shift that needed to be made. And I made the call. And that is like sort of and it was a difficult conversation. It was not necessarily the most kumbaya sort of parting of ways, because fundamentally both of us were passionate about the perspective, and passion did not make the decision. I would like to think logic made the decision, but that is my take on that, right? Like, so when you have a startup, there is one person responsible for that decision. I think matters a lot. And it just so happens I have been the CEO on for my 3 startups. And I think it fits some of my skills better than, like, I would suck at ops. I would just be really bad at ops. I think I'd be okay at product, but I'd probably want to do more. I don't think I would be great in terms of CRO. I certainly can't be VP of engineering. So at some level, I think my role, I'm either CEO, go to market, or I'm not. But I would like to think it's not that, hey, I have to be the CEO, as much as I recognize there can only be one of those folks. And you almost, I used to even with Stitchflow, even with the current company, like until you make it, or even if you haven't made it, like you're still small potatoes. And it's like, oh, I'm the CEO. There's this, I would feel embarrassed to say, hey, I'm the CEO, I'm going to make this decision. We're this like podunk company in this like small shack somewhere. What in the world? It's like, why the self-importance? And it's actually not about the self-importance. It's actually for the good of the company. Somebody needs to make that decision. And if you're all trying to always get to consensus, it comes back to 0 to 1. You're going to run out of time. That's it. And it's going to be miserable. Everyone's going to be miserable, and you're going to run out of time. So that's my general take.
Talk to us about Stitchflow. How did you zero in on that problem to solve, and then you changed the problem to solve? So
yeah, I mean, so we spoke about this earlier, but I didn't want to go through the learning curve again on a new industry, and so atSpoke, my previous startup, we sold to IT teams, mid-market IT teams, and Okta, we were selling to mid-market and some enterprise IT teams, and then I was like, you know what? I've been serving mid-market IT teams, and I'm passionate about mid-market IT teams. And I've been serving them for almost a decade now. We're going to go start a company in that space. And so we started Stitchflow in 2023, to solve essentially SaaS sprawl. How do I stitch together all of the different tools I'm using within my company? How do I make sure I'm not wasting licenses? How do I make sure I don't have security holes, compliance holes, etc.? That was the space that we went into. And what we learned so the pivot that and I'll tell you about the pivot, we've pivoted into a marketing role, but basically a marketing product. But For 2.5 years, I would like to think that we objectively evaluated and tried our best to make Stitchflow work. And that comes to like my sort of like, I get faster at the iterations now, but you know what? We started with the product. We kept iterating the product, and then we kept iterating the customer segment. We kept iterating the marketing, and fundamentally the ICPs and the marketing channels that we did. And we were growing, but it was just not, it wasn't, you could sort of, between AI coming in and automating a lot of this stuff, coupled with just viscerally, you don't see that sort of that pull increase over time. I think the decision, what I realized was Stitchflow as a service focused on IT teams is not going to, long-term is not going to succeed. And I think that's the decision that we came to. By the way, I am probably way slower at making that decision than a lot of folks are. And again, different rules, like different people have different rubrics here. One of my favorite examples of this on the other side is the VC at Sutter Hill, Mike Spicer, I think. I remember him like a few months ago or like a year ago, he launched this new product, and that was all he was talking about for 3 months. And then he saw that it didn't go anywhere in 3 months. He shut it down. And I could never do that personally, right? Like he's like, we're going to grind until we figure it out. And I think what happened with Stitchflow was I got to the stage where I feel probably a little too late, or probably could have made this decision earlier, but our core thesis about how we can stitch together all of your different IT tools and help IT teams is not viable as a standalone company that's going to scale. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, the question is, what do you do? What else do you do? And so even that, until we knew exactly what we were going to do, I think the decision is hard, right? Do you shut down the company? Do you return capital to the investors, or do you pivot? And then what happened was Claude Code came out end of December 25, Opus 4.6. And in early Jan, so one of the, like I'm rambling a bit, but basically one of the things that I've owned across all my startups is go to market. So sales and marketing. And fundamentally, I believe every founder is phenomenal at sales. Yes, you're super bad at the follow-ups and always asking for a next meeting and stuff like that. But there's nobody on earth that can sell better than a founder, because you know the domain, you know the product, you can control the roadmap. It's phenomenal. So most founders in the early stage, the first 10 customers, you get those first 10 customers on your own.
Yeah. You
get them on your own. You are the best salesperson that can do that. Then what happens is you've tapped out your investors and you've tapped out your network. And now you have to set up your demand gen function. And across my 3 startups, that's what I've owned. And then come January of 26, Claude Code, agentic coding, suddenly I'm like, wait a minute. What if I took all the stuff that we're doing in marketing at Stitchflow and just amplified that? And so I realized I actually know all of the different things that you want to do from a 0 to 1 demand gen engine set up, where you are able to accurately convey what the product is and be technically accurate. You're able to translate all of your thoughts into a lot more content. You're able to do account-based outreach at scale. You're able to find every conversation online that is relevant to your industry and engage in them. You're able to like create compelling programmatic SEO. I suddenly realized, wait, I've been doing this, and this unlock came about with Claude Code, where the month of January, for 2 weeks, I was just suddenly, I'm like, wait a minute, all this, because we're still trying to sell Stitchflow, the IT product. And I'm like, okay, maybe marketing is the issue. So we're just going to amplify the heck out of it. And so in 2 weeks, I basically built out a bunch of the components. And then my team, my phenomenal marketing team, to their absolute credit, I basically said, hey, we are only now an agentic AI agentic marketing team. And to their absolute credit, every single one of them picked it up. And so suddenly within a month, we had like 6x, 7x, 8x our like website volume, all to agentic outreach and just amplifying everything. So all this happened in January and February. And you know what? We're still selling Stitchflow, the IT product, and the trajectory wasn't changing. And I think that was the final nail in the coffin for me as proof that it doesn't make sense to keep grinding against what we were doing for IT. And so, and then I was having a conversation.
So you made this decision in February, March?
I'd say going back to the gut read, I probably knew like a year ago.
Yeah.
But
you saw it coming,
we saw it coming. And I think we were doing our damnedest, like, you know, like my stupid cliche here is quitters quit. And so you don't quit, right? You keep going.
Yeah.
And I think, so you could tell it wasn't working. It's back to that, hey, the feedback loops.
Yeah.
I know that outbound sequence isn't really going to work. That's something wrong with the ICP or the positioning or the messaging, but yeah, you got to wait for it to go. So we knew, but I don't think it still felt like the right decision. And maybe it was avoidance, et cetera, to not shut down. But I think for me, at least intellectually, I could feel rigorous saying, hey, we've actually amplified demand gen.
Mm-hmm.
It is also not taking off. And so you can solve demand gen, you can't solve PMF. And that was sort of, so the official decision was made. Actually, it was an interesting decision. I sent quarterly investor updates and I used fiscal quarter. So I sent my investor update I sent an investor update Feb 1st. And in that investor update, I explicitly said, hey, this is what happened. By the way, we're doing this thing on the product. Also, I just discovered and started mucking around with this stuff and we're trying a lot of stuff. And so I'm actually not going to tell you what we're going to do for the next 3 months because I'm giving all of you a heads up that we might need to actually completely pivot because of what's happening with agentic AI. And so I gave the investors a heads up and then I sent the second update, May 1st, the quarter later. And I was like, hey, guess what? We're no longer an IT company. We're a AI marketing company. And so that's basically, so what happened was everything that we set up for, our team, the Stitchflow IT product, we realized was actually valuable to other 0 to 1 founders as well. They have their first 10 customers and they're now like, hey, I have to go set up a demand gen function. And what we realized was through a combination of one experience, my team and I, we've done this a bunch now. So we just know the best practices, the blocking and tackling around what setting up marketing in a demand gen function is. How do you think about strategy? How do you think about all of the different functions, all of the actions? We had that so we could help folks think through the strategy, like just question strategy. What is the best way to go about this? How do you translate that to positioning, messaging, et cetera? But most importantly, at this stage, 0 to 1, you're trying to crash the experiment space. Mm-hmm. You don't know what your perfect ICP and perfect channel is. You don't. And that's where AI thrives. What if I could suddenly take every possible ICP that I care about, take every position that I care about, create super high quality content and techniques to go after them and run that at scale. That's basically what we did at Stitchflow, which told us, and we saw the results from a marketing perspective. We didn't see the results from a revenue perspective because of PMF. And so we're now helping teams do that.
You talked about the updates for the investors. And I think also your role as CEO, this is the seat that makes most sense for your expertise and what you enjoy doing. The investor relationship is critical. Choosing the right investors is critical, especially in this time. What are the lessons learned and how you've both chosen the investors to work with, especially in this journey, and how have they been reacting to, the cadence of updates where now, a week is an eternity in today's AI world.
Yeah.
So just really curious of how you manage that.
Yeah, I think there are a few different things there, right? So, I would hope most VCs would agree with this. So I've probably had on my cap table 20 to 30 VCs across my 3 startups, like across all of them. And largely, I have been fortunate that I have not had any bad VCs. Like you hear all these stories about the VC blocking the acquisition or doing something that is completely against what the founders want, et cetera. And I've had, in that sense, just phenomenal partners. This is my sort of almost cynical point of view, and I say this intentionally because I think all of the VCs that I have are phenomenally smart, but the reality is you are one of X bets, and there's only so much they can do, and so that's it. You start with that perspective, number one. Second perspective you have to go in with is everyone should do what is in best interest of their organization, not them, but their organization. So a VC should put you, should has to put their limited partners first. They should put that pension fund or that hospital chain first, not you, right? Those are sort of like the two things. So like to give you a specific example, at atSpoke, my previous company, there was a phase 4 years in where we needed to raise our next round of money. And we were growing. It was reasonable, but this was like in 21, early 2020, mid 2020, when the world was insane. Like everything was exploding all the time. Like all of the startups were growing, and so we were growing, but we weren't growing fast enough to raise a reasonable round. And I was like, I literally remember this. I went to my VCs, Jerry Chen at Greylock and Vas Natarajan at Accel, and we were talking about this, and they are being as helpful as possible, putting me in touch with as many people as possible. And I think in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, hey, Jerry and Vas, you see that the company's doing okay. Why aren't you just adding more? And I realize that is not the right thing for them to do for Accel or Greylock. And I think that is an internalization and so what they could do was, as much as possible, help me out. If I could find somebody else, they would absolutely participate but they have to do what is right for their organization. So I believe in that philosophy deeply. Fundamentally, your VC is not going to save you. You have to you have to recognize that they are doing what is best for their organization. So with that said, then I have a very sort of simple approach to being VCs. You want good people that are aligned with you, that will pick up the phone if you need advice, but just recognize there's not that much you can ask of them, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like my approach. I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's how I think about VCs.
No, I think really understanding, myself coming up and really understanding their incentives and how they work and operate. And it's something often missed, just even the power law dynamics of how they look at portfolio and saying, look, it's going to happen with, and it's even more concentrated now with these outliers. And so you're a lottery ticket to them in many respects. They are making serious bets. They're trying to be very thoughtful, but there's a game that we're playing, and there's different roles that we have, and knowing those rules and how it works is really important.
No, absolutely. It is a power law. You have to recognize it. I would argue you don't want to work with a VC that's not thinking that way, because they're probably not going to be the best at their job. Yeah. And internalizing that as a founder matters so much. Then you're looking for ethical, good people that are smart, that are willing to give you advice when you ask for it, that are helpful when they can be, is what you're looking for. And if not, at least don't be negative. Like, don't be a detriment is the rule.
And reverses the direction. So the onus is on you to make the company attractive enough for them to participate.
100%. My single favorite founder advice blog post is from Ben Horowitz, and I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's called Nobody Cares. Nobody cares. Things are tough.
Yeah.
Your team doesn't care. Your investors don't care. Your mother doesn't care. It's on you. Figure it out. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to change the direction a little bit. Part of the reason why Brendan and I are doing this is to build the dialogue on product and product companies in the US-India corridor. And we had that corridor is very active from an IT and IT services perspective, but it's still in early days, and maybe we've had 6-7 years of building product companies from this part of the world. You built your first 2 companies in the US and in the Silicon Valley, and were successful. And then you made the decision to build the third one from India. Why did you make the decision? And layer 2 to that question is, what is it different about building from India versus building in the US?
The coffee's better. Okay. So let's see. The why was actually a very sort of pragmatic initial why, which was my experience at Spoke, my second company selling to IT. At our largest, we probably got to around 50 people. And I think there was the dynamics of selling to IT is it's a trust-based considered purchase over time. somebody is going to learn about you, become aware of you, and then when the renewal is up for their existing software, or when they actually have an initiative around ticketing, or when something drastic happens, they're going to convert. They're not going to like say, hey, I just heard about Spoke, I'm going to like switch over. That's the nature of a lot of IT buying. To do that well, and to build a large company, to become the next Freshworks, to become the next Atlassian, you need to last. You need to be methodical. You need to build over time. You need to market over time, and you need to be sustainable. And so I think there was a very pragmatic call that I made after Spoke, where I was like, honestly, at some level, and by the way, this is the dynamics of 23, starting Stitchflow in 23 versus Spoke in 2016. The world was a lot more startups were more global. There was a lot more sort of the ability to find talent across the world. And hey, if on top of that you can actually leverage some cost arbitrage, that sounds great. And so that was the sort of very pragmatic take on hiring outside of a bunch of folks in Silicon Valley. That said, we were, again, 0 to 1, we were extremely nervous. My co-founders and I, we were extremely nervous about interviewing a bunch of people on Zoom and hiring them. It just, back to everything that you need. There is no playbook for what you're doing. We're trying to figure stuff out. And so we actually made an explicit decision that, okay, to be sustainable as an IT, as a company selling to IT teams, we need to have something outside of San Francisco and the Bay Area. And two, we can't just hire remotely. We need to go do it locally.
Be with the team.
And so the logical thing there then was India. I grew up in Chennai. Shankar, my co-founder, grew up in Chennai. So India was the logical thing. I think we made the contrarian decision to start a company in Chennai versus Bangalore, for example. For again, I think partially personal reasons, partially Chennai has this phenomenal sort of legacy of people building good tools for IT teams like Zoho, Manage Engine, Freshworks, etc. And so partially personally, partially for sort of like the type of talent that we were looking for, we came to Chennai. So that was that's the origin story. Look, we know we had to build a team that was sustainable, and we needed to do it in person because it's really hard to hire and train remotely. And the logical choice for us, for our profile, was Chennai. So that's the why behind what we did. What did we learn? I mean, so much. Fundamentally, if I were to summarize everything in a nutshell, talent quality is equal. Talent polish is not, which just basically meant we have absolutely achieved what we wanted by finding our building our India team, but it took us way longer than we thought it would. It took a lot more training. It took a lot more sort of us learning what was required to get folks to the sort of, and I can go into a lot of details on this. We have equally phenomenal talent in Silicon Valley as we have in Chennai, but you have to put in the effort to find them and train them. That's the sort of summary.
There's an embedded startup idea somewhere on polishing score.
What kind of training are you talking about?
I'd say some of it is just cultural. So, for example, when I get feedback, I'm direct and I'm intentional. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just being direct. And if something isn't great, I'm like, hey, I really like this, but I think we can do this better. It took a while for people to get used to that. Or you have to like look for people that aren't, oh my God, I just got yelled at by this. No, you didn't get yelled at. It was like, this is a small thing. It's things like that. It's a lot of it is cultural. And this just actually goes back to my defensiveness rule. That defensive, you are going to be wrong in a 0 to 1 startup. If you're defensive, you're screwed. And I think a lot of, or some cultural aspects of the Indian talent pool that we find, that defensiveness is amplified. So it's even more important to screen for that. So that's like one sort of tactical example. I would say from a capability, skill, general awareness, best practices, etc., there's nothing to train. phenomenal. The quality of the marketing team, the quality of the CS team, the quality for their tenure, et cetera, that we found in Chennai was equivalent. So that part wasn't an issue.
And in many ways, I relate to that. Our journey is the other way around. It started in Asia and expanding into the US. And it's not the core aspects of building. It's not the core functional talent aspects. It's the softer aspects that complete the individual, which includes communication, which includes reaction to feedback. It includes it's the interaction element between people that layer tends to be culturally wrapped, and therefore is different from how you would see that in a Silicon Valley context too. And in many ways, I myself have to rewire some of that as we think about our own expansion. So I can relate to the cultural aspect that directly.
I think it's all cultural, frankly, right? Yeah. So basically, it is all cultural, and there is obviously, as we're all aware, like a slightly looser adherence to the notion of time in Chennai than perhaps in San Francisco, and that is not. There's no malice anywhere. So it's just, there are these, I think, like actual specific things about, hey, we have daily stand-up at 1 o'clock or 10 o'clock. That means you are here for daily stand-up at 1 o'clock or 10 o'clock matters. And it was like, oh, the rickshaw isn't here, or oops, something happened. Yeah, that's not how it works. Yeah. Stand-up's at 10. And so I think there was a lot of training around that. And I would like to think there were some parts of it, again, in service of Stitchflow. Shankar and I did not bend on some of this stuff. We were like, we would rather be the bad guys, or like, yeah, I get that it's a different culture, but sorry, this is in service of Stitchflow. Like things around customer communication, things around certain aspects around feedback, things like that. I think we learned to start telling people during interviews, hey, our feedback style is direct. And by the way, this is what we mean by direct. For example, we will say this. And I think so we started screening for that, but at least giving people a heads up on that. So that's, there's definitely a key aspect there. I'll tell you the other side though. So technically, capability wise, phenomenal. Again, it's the same thing. You got to find the right people, but on par, no question about that. The cultural side, it's nuances. So you have to, some of it requires, frankly, more training, like the ability to take feedback, the ability to act on something, what deadlines mean, et cetera. And some of it is just cultural. On the flip side, I don't think I have seen in any of my startups the camaraderie among the team that I see among the Indian teams that I have. Versus they're just they are naturally more social. They are naturally they bring their entire selves to work every day. Yeah. They are friends at work, they are friends outside of work. And that is so cool when you're all trying to do something together. It's just built in.
Yes. And I'm smiling because I so relate to that. It's the camaraderie gets built like instantly. Or almost.
You're welcomed in. You are welcomed in.
And that's cultural too. In many ways.
Yeah, I think that there are two things that I think that I'm very curious about. There's a transient nature to places like San Francisco of just how people look at approach jobs and the careers and just even life, which is less of the communal base sometimes. And so you really have to build organizations that try to foster it, but also recognize that is embedded in the culture to some extent. But the second thing that I think has translated well to places like New York and other parts of the world, but goes through its own process, is just the culture of risk taking. And so people, I think, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if you're working at a startup, it wasn't really considered a real job in some respects. And that's changed significantly in places like the US, where now everyone's trying to do that. Have you seen, or has that happened here in terms of the shift, or was there a culture where it was somewhat frowned upon or looked with skepticism, and now it's something that people aspire to be a part of and take on that kind of risk. And the culture of failure, I think it comes up, right?
I would say there is no question that there is quote unquote lower risk tolerance here than, for example, in San Francisco. I think that's just a given. Has that changed and has it improved over time? Absolutely. I mean, Qapita's customer list is proof of that, right? Like there are more startups. I would say, so yeah, objectively there are, and I would say Chennai in that sense is even more risk averse than let's say Bangalore, right? Or Mumbai. So I think there's definitely risk averseness. The flip side though is I think startups are, and it's really interesting because I don't know how, so sort of like just a few thoughts on this. One, is Chennai more risk averse? Is the average Chennai engineer more risk averse than the average Bangalore engineer, than the average San Francisco engineer? Probably. That said, I think startups are increasingly accepted as and I'm not saying accepted as in like, oh, it's this like secret thing that's suddenly happening. It's like much more common now. So it's, first of all, I think there is a critical mass already and that's growing. With that said, it is interesting to me that I think Indians, and I don't know if it's more so in Chennai versus Bangalore, but certainly less so than Americans and certainly less so than folks in San Francisco. They are not viewing a role at Stitchflow as a stint that, hey, I'm going to try this out. And I'm glad that they are that way, but there is this sort of, there is a risk averseness to in terms of moving around much more so than in America. So like when someone joins a company, they stay here. And so I don't know, like, and so that's sort of how I see it manifest. Yep. People do not, they don't job hop that much in Chennai. I believe there's a little bit more of that in Bangalore. It's certainly common in San Francisco, et cetera. And sort of the American way, right? Like you're in it you're optimizing for what is best for the company, or optimizing what is best for the individual. There's a little less of that in Chennai. Yeah.
It's actually become a running joke in some of this, what's going on, and any kind of bubble environment, or let's say, enthusiastic environment, where how fast seats could sometimes change.
Oh yeah.
And Jay put it brilliantly. It's people bringing their whole selves to work.
Yeah, I really like that.
I couldn't put it in a better sentence, and people do that. And that's also fabric and culture of where it is. So it's easier to build cohesive, coherent, aligned teams that much faster when you're bringing your whole self to work.
Yeah.
The flip side on the polish, you use the word polish. I think the talent capability is there. The cultural cohesiveness is there. I think that the elements that what he called polish is simply around process and discipline, and those are the two areas where you tend to take more freedom, or you're slipping on the boundaries. And so that's also a learning curve, but I don't think there's a big difference in the core talent density or even talent depth.
Yeah, that's that's a boot camp that you could go and get people.
Therefore, you're already seeing this is the third largest startup market in the world, and there's a big jump from the US to China and China to India, and there's a long tail, but we
might have to start another company now. Yeah.
Well, Ravi was saying, completely agree. And in fact, I will take it a step further. Like the notion around discipline around time or deliverables, Shankar, my co-founder, I was annoyed about some deliverable that didn't happen or something. And then he pulls me aside and he's like, did you tell them that was the actual date and you meant it? And some of it is just expectation setting. They're like, yeah, we usually said, oh, well, I'll get it done by end of day means I'll get it done by end of day tomorrow was what I used to work like. Oh, you actually mean end of day today means end of day today. Got it. I'll do it. It's almost just like communication. That was all that was required. Yeah.
Jay, it's interesting to speak to a founder going through a pivot at the time of the pivot. So I'm going to ask you to indulge and make an elevator pitch. If there was a customer of Stitchflow today with your post pivot to marketing, what's the elevator pitch?
So first of all, I don't even know if the company's called Stitchflow anymore, but that's a different story. No, look, fundamentally what we do is we help founders who have their first 5 to 10 customers that they've acquired from network, from their own network, from investor networks, etc. They found these first 5 or 10 customers and they know the product works, but they're like, wait, what do the next 50 look like? How do I get there? What's my ICP? What is the positioning? What we do is we help you. The instinct in this situation, this is a bad elevator pitch, by the way. It's a very long elevator ride. But the instinct in this situation tends to be, hey, I got to go hire a marketing person. I got to go hire a VP of marketing. I got to go hire a marketing lead. The problem is it's not at this stage, the 0 to 1, that I have 10 customers. How do I get to 50? You actually don't know exactly what to go do. You have to iterate on the positioning, the ideal ICP, where you find that repeatability. And the best person to do that is the founder. They know all of the ins and outs and the technical details, et cetera. And so what we do is, with my team and I, using AI to amplify our individual capabilities, what we're essentially doing is helping you lock on your marketing strategy based on that, developing your tactical roadmap and amplifying all of the different parts of demand gen, account-based outreach, social listening, thought leadership, SEO, programmatic SEO. We basically use AI to do all of those things for you. And we have sort of the human judgment on our side, and we amplify what our capabilities with AI, and therefore we're able to serve multiple teams.
Agentic amplification of founder-led sales, founder-led GTM motion.
I love that phrasing. Thank you. I'm going to use it. Agentic amplification of founder-led marketing, not sales, because that at this stage, the stage that we're dealing with, the founder plus one other colleague can absolutely do the sales calls.
Got it.
So it is the top of funnel. How do I get the leads? How do I, when someone increasingly this day and age, the role of your website is you're doing all this research offline. You're doing all this research using LLMs, et cetera. And so what you're now coming to, so you're coming to the website as for credibility. You're coming to the website for trust. You're actually coming to the website so what is the positioning on the website? What does the website do? All of that. From there to how are you telling people that you exist, and what are the experiments that you're running across different buyer types as well as different positioning should be founder led. And so we use agentic AI to amplify that founder led concepts across all these channels.
Awesome. This has been fascinating. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. It was fun.